Michelle thinks American men suck.
Let me warn you, your rage does not exist in a vacuum. If we don't get this election right, your wife, your daughter, your mother, we as women will become collateral damage to your rage. To the women listening, we have every right to demand that the men in our lives do better.
Greg Gutfeld didn't just criticize Michelle Obama. He tore apart the shiny, perfect image she spent years building. With his usual mix of sarcasm and sharp humor, he exposed the gap between how she presents herself to the public and the political games. She's been quietly playing behind the scenes. This wasn't a light jab it was a full takedown. By the end of it, even some of her biggest supporters were left wondering. The woman they had admired all these years had been hiding something. Michelle had recently said that women need to speak up and remind...
We have to use our voices to make these choices clear to the men that we love. Our lives are worth more than their anger and disappointment.
What's that pitter-patter sound I'm hearing in the background? It's the footsteps of Barack running to vote for Trump. So, Kat, they know that they're having a hard time with men.
Right.
Doesn't seem like this is the right strategy.
No.
She basically says that they're...
the men in their lives that their love isn't worth putting up with anger and disappointment. It was meant to be empowering, but to Gutfeld, it sounded out of touch. He looked straight into the camera and said, "What's that sound I'm hearing?" "Well, that's just Barack running to vote for Trump." The crowd laughed. The message was serious. If Democrats think they can win back men with speeches like that, they might be in for a surprise. Gutfeld came into the studio that night with a kind of swagger, like he knew he had something loaded.
Even if they run Michelle. According to a new poll, Michelle Obama isn't as strong a Democratic candidate against former President Donald Trump as many Dems would have you believe. In a hypothetical matchup, my favorite kind, Trump wins with 47% of the vote compared to Michelle Obama's 44%. I guess some of the kids whose school lunches she ruined are finally old enough to vote.
And ready to fire, and it was aimed right at Michelle Obama. She was the focus of the night. Once the First Lady, now a media star, podcast host, in face of big brands like Nike, but Gutfeld wasn't impressed. He opened the segment by saying, "Let's talk about Michelle." He spun his pen in his fingers like it was a weapon, then pointed to a new poll. In a potential 2024 matchup, Donald Trump would beat Michelle Obama 47% to 44%. Gutfeld joked, "I guess the kids whose school lunches she ruined are finally old enough to vote."
Rumors continue to escalate for the Obamas. Hopefully they can settle it like men.
Line set the tone. He wasn't pulling punches. He went after her memoir, Becoming, saying it might as well have been called Becoming a Billionaire. He joked about how she talks about the struggles of being famous and living in a mansion while still expecting sympathy. Then he dropped the line that really landed with the crowd. "Have you noticed the pattern?" he asked. Every time she talks, it's about how she's overcoming something, how she's rising, which is pretty funny because she's been on top for more than a decade. People laughed not just because it was clever, but because it felt true. Gutfeld wasn't just mocking her. He was pointing out something real. Michelle often speaks like she's still fighting to be heard. Even though she's already one of the most powerful and admired women in the world, he kept going. "Don't get me wrong," he said, pretending. "To sound fair, she's smart. She's talented. She's done a lot. But let's not act like she's some underdog. She's not Rocky. She's not rising from the bottom."
Maybe so, but her analysis seems a symptom of a greater problem that contributed to her party's loss. It goes back to seeing the group and not the person. I call it IPB, identity politics blindness. They lost not because Hillary was a woman. They lost because all they saw was a woman. Meanwhile, Trump took nothing for granted. Fact is, many voters would have happily voted for a woman, just not that one. Because unlike Trump, she didn't speak to their concerns. She only spoke of her entitlement. She just assumed that she had the vote. And just assuming a woman must vote for a woman seems pretty insulting from a man. Humans are more complex, surprising, and interesting then liberals give them.
She's a brand. She's a product. She's like a wise Jedi master butt with a Nike deal and a personal stylist. The audience laughed again. And then Gutfeld painted the picture her. Book tours. Her branded lunchboxes. Her podcast clips, where she talks about emotional struggles while sitting in fancy chairs wearing designer clothes. To him, it all felt too polished, too packaged, too perfect, underneath the jokes and the laughter. Gutfeld's point was clear. Michelle Obama isn't the humble, relatable woman she pretends to be. She's part of the machine. And maybe, the shine is starting to wear off. Greg Gutfeld wasn't holding back. He looked straight into the camera and said, struggling to find balance. While standing in a designer kitchen the size of a Whole Foods, then he paused. The studio got quiet. We're not being inspired, he said. We're being sold something. Michelle Obama isn't just a public figure anymore. She's a brand, a lifestyle. And guess what? It's not about empowering you. It's about marketing.
Michelle Obama has openly admitted that she and Barack sleep in separate bedrooms. Here's how it works. She sleeps downstairs and he likes men.
Getting to you. He called it inspirational capitalism. Feel-good speeches and Instagram captions all wrapped up and sold with a smile. Then he dropped the real bomb. She says she doesn't want to run for president, he said, raising an eyebrow. And maybe that's true. But she sure gives speeches that sound like she's getting ready. Just in case America starts missing those flowery speeches that say a lot, but also nothing. Gutfeld wasn't just poking fun. He was making a deeper point. Michelle's message is part of a bigger problem. He called it identity politics, blindness, the mistake of focusing only on what someone is, instead of who they are. He brought up the 2016 election. They didn't lose because Hillary was a woman, he said. They lost because they thought that was enough. Meanwhile, Trump didn't assume anything. He actually tried to connect with people. Lots of voters were ready to vote for a woman, just not that woman, because Hillary didn't talk to them. She talked at.
In the latest installment of What Happened in an Election That Occurred a Year and a Half Ago, Michelle Obama was asked how Trump won, and she laid the blame on Hillary. Just kidding, she blamed sexism from women against women.
In light of this last election, I'm concerned about us as women and how we think. If we're not comfortable with the notion that a woman could be our president compared to what? You know, we have to have that conversation with ourselves.
Them, like they owed her their vote. Then Gutfeld hit a line that sent the audience into laughter. Liberals don't give people enough credit. Humans are more complex than that. He mocked Michelle's usual tone, throwing his arms wide and using a soft voice. We need to rise. Above, we need to come together. We need to hope. We need to buy my hardcover book for $29.99, now available at Target. The crowd cracked up. But he wasn't done. He focused next on what he called her favorite card, the martyr card. Michelle always reminds us how tough it was to live in the White House, he said. She says she had to be perfect. Couldn't mess up. Couldn't. Be too black, couldn't be too loud. Then headed dry as ever, you know. Like every other first lady who had to host dinners and decorate Christmas trees. Except none of them got a podcast deal produced by their own husband. He compared it to writing your own 5-star Yelp review. The crowd laughed again, but the gloves were off now. She talks about imposter syndrome, he said, while being one of the most
Michelle's been busy working on a new podcast, and so far, it's been a flop. The first 2 episodes have been up all day and only gotten a few thousand views on YouTube. Half of them are probably primetime producers. But still, Michelle's spilling the family secrets, like how Barry gets on her nerves. Listen.
Barack, he had to adjust to what on time was for
Because he was on that island time.
Well, but, I've got this husband who's like, when it's time to leave, it's 3 o'clock, he's getting up and going to the bathroom. And I was like, dude, like 3 o'clock departure means you've done all that, It's like, don't start looking for your glasses, at the 3 o'clock.
Raised and protected people alive. Lady, if you're an imposter, what chance do the rest of us have? He didn't stop there. You're everywhere. On my cereal box, my Spotify playlist. Somehow, even in my dreams. Michelle Obama is the algorithm now. Then he said something. That made everyone freeze. She's even said she and Barack sleep in separate rooms. Here's how it works. She sleeps downstairs. And he likes men. Gutfeld leaned back, calm and serious. We used to say Big Brother is watching now. Big Michelle is podcasting. And Rue, when it seemed like he was finished, Gutfeld launched into his closing attack. Michelle's real power, he said, isn't just her charm, it's that you can't touch her. She's bulletproof. If you criticize her, you're suddenly a sexist, a racist, or some kind of monster. But if she sells you the same old quotes with a $90 candle and a motivational playlist, that's called leadership. The audience didn't know whether to laugh or be stunned. Gutfeld had made his point. Michelle Obama isn't just a public figure. She's a brand, a shield, and a carefully protected empire. In questioning her,
to talk to you about Michelle Obama's ongoing midlife meltdown, like her, like as you put it, her Stegosaurus hairdos. The utterance the other day, she says she's transitioning. I mean, I think we both know what she's trying to do by using that word.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you make of all of this? Like, what's going on in that psyche?
I think that transitioning line was meant to get attention because her podcast is failing. No one wants to watch it, and she's not used to that. You know, she's used to being the center of attention. Everyone's interested in me. I don't have to try hard. And so now she
did like a crime. The audience didn't quite know how to react at first. Half shocked, half delighted, they weren't used to seeing someone go after Michelle Obama with that much energy. Accuracy, and honestly, enjoyment. Gutfeld wasn't just poking fun. He was peeling back the layers. It's all curated. He said it's all manufactured. This isn't real life. It's politics, dressed up as lifestyle branding. He took a sip, paused for effect, then added, at this point, the only thing more polished than her PR team is her arms. The room burst into laughter, and just when things were settling down, he dropped the line that set the internet on fire. She didn't become folks. She became a franchise. He was talking about how Michelle Obama had responded to the last election. She had been asked why Trump won, and instead of pointing to policy or campaign mistakes, she blamed sexism specifically from women toward other women. In light of this last election, she said, I'm concerned about how we, as women, think. If we're not comfortable with the idea of a woman...
Michelle Obama surprised fans on our new podcast by saying her pet peeve about her husband is that he's chronically late. For example, we're still waiting on him to admit he's from Kenya. And as for Barack's pet peeve about Michelle, he's mad that she keeps leaving the toilet seat up. When she cleans it. When she cleans it.
I regret that.
Whoopi Goldberg.
And being president, ... We have to have that conversation with ourselves. Gutfeld didn't let it slide. Called it self-importance, served with a side of kale. People laughed, but then his tone shifted slightly. It's not too serious, just enough to land something real. The real problem, he said, isn't Michelle. It's that people keep falling for the same playbook. The emotional speeches, the buzzwords, the empowerment talk, it all sounds good. But it's used to distract from the fact that the system underneath it all never changes. And that hit different. Because Gutfeld wasn't just joking about Michelle Obama. He was calling out the whole machine she's part of. The media praise, the filtered photos, the feel-good slogans. It's not just about her. It's about what she represents. The blending of celebrity, politics, and branding. He wasn't mocking what she had done. He was asking why it always had. To come wrapped in so much polish, why do we confuse being famous with being honest? Why do we call someone relatable when their biggest daily stress is whether to do a TED Talk or pose for Vogue? Then, with perfect timing, he dropped one last shot.
Other than the wonderful Megyn Kelly in the United States. Now, why is Michelle Obama whinging? She seems to always be whinging. Why are things so hard for her right now?
I know. I mean, because when you're thinking of victims of this awful world, you think of Michelle Obama and how terrible we've all been to her. This woman is a one-woman destitution derby. every time we check in on her at her podcast, she is feeling sorry for herself. She is criticizing Barack Obama or this country. She never has a positive word to say about anything. And the latest example was when she went on this other guy's podcast, Jay Shetty. She goes and sits down with him, and he asks her, what are you afraid of? And she starts off by saying, well, it's not, my fears aren't for me. You know, I think about the streets. My fears aren't for me.
Well, in this current climate for me, it's,
She's been busy with a new podcast, he said. And it's been a flop, he explained. The first 2 episodes had barely gotten a few thousand views on YouTube. Half of those are probably producers checking if they can use any clips in prime time. In the podcast, Michelle shares family stories like how Barack always runs late. Greater than you know, she says. He had to learn what on time means. We've got a 3 o'clock flight, and at 3, he's still in the bathroom looking for his glasses. And I'm like, dude, a 3 o'clock departure means you're ready. At 3, not just starting to get dressed, Gutfeld didn't even need to add much commentary after that. She's not leading a movement, he said flatly. A marketing campaign, and we're the customers, buying her books, her candles, her workout clothes. Mike DRP, but this wasn't just meant to tear Michelle Obama down. It was meant to shake things up.